Deborah de Freitas. Deborah graduated from the University of Texas with degrees in English, history, and psychology. Her communication skills have been used to serve the growth of several Austin area tech companies. In her spare time, she writes fiction, serves on the board of Austin Batcave, which teaches creative writing skills to children, and sees as many movies as she can at the Alamo Drafthouse. Her book addiction is enabled by a living carpenter who loves her enough to keep building shelves in every corner of their home. Please help me welcome Deborah.
The club was cold and echoing, the balcony dark and shadowed. Only the lights around the stage and the sound booth were lit. Miranda shivered and grabbed a scarf from her bag to wrap around her neck. It was really more for an added layer of protection from the dark atmosphere than any attempt to keep her vocal cords warm. She'd never been that kind of singer. She smoked, she drank. There was no hot water with lemon waiting for her in the dressing room. If anything, she felt like the abuse of her vocal cords had made her voice perfect for the kind of songs she sang. Her range was decent, but it was the raspy quality of her voice that made people say things like haunting and otherworldly when they described their music. Sound check wasn't going well. Vince hadn't arrived yet, and even before they added his guitar, the sound engineer hadn't been able to balance her vocals so it could be heard over the drums and bass. The keyboards had a feedback loop they were trying to chase down, and everyone's tempers were on edge. But years of experience and not a small bit of superstition told her that horrible sound checks usually made for amazing performances, so she tried not to let it bother her. Not enough sleep, she thought. They'd gone out late the night before, ending up on a balcony in the quarter, drinking purple drinks with lovely men and eating a bag of beignets on the way back to their rented house in the Marigny. They joked about leaving trails of sugar behind to find their way back. Morning had come too early with a spot booked on a local radio show. She didn't think that station would have normally played their songs, but around Halloween everyone loved a spooky band, and their sold-out shows meant there were at least a few crossover fans. She'd meant to go back to the house for a nap, but there hadn't been time. Breakfast had led to a quick shopping excursion, which had led into a lunchtime appearance at an independent record store, and after that the guys had wanted to hit the poor boy shop on Decatur, so she tagged along. She checked her phone. Vince's plane should have already landed, but perhaps his driver was stuck making his way into the quarter. She thought about asking the tour manager if she'd heard from him, but decided against it. The unconcerned girlfriend after the past 2 days should not be undone in this final hour. Of course she'd been hurt that he'd not come with her. She'd been hoping for a few days of vacation with him before the new tour began, and New Orleans was romantic, at least it had always been to her. And if it wasn't to him, well then it meant he was still thinking about Sabine, and that made it hurt even more. He never talked about her, but she was always there between them, in his music, in his thoughts, and she was finally admitting to herself in his heart. She'd been an idiot to think that she had been the love of his life, and she'd known his history. But after that weekend, the last time they'd been here together, in fact, he'd seemed so lost and he'd clung to her. His partying and sleeping around had stopped abruptly. Miranda had assumed it was her good influence on him. But she couldn't even enjoy the success they were having now with the band and with their lives, because for the next 8 months, she'd be singing his songs about the girl who got away. Miranda was of the opinion that Sabine had run away, that she wasn't missing or lost or anything, and that if something had happened to her, they would have found out by now. Sabine had had enough money to disappear without a trace. Miranda had thought she'd just not wanted to face the music. Perfect Sabine, fallen from grace, caught up in an all too common affair. The tour manager came to the side of the stage and waved at her. Miranda was expecting the announcement that Vince was here or an update on his status, but she just wanted to review the guest list for tickets and backstage passes. It was amazing to her how many people claimed to be close personal friends of Miranda the rock star, when most of them had never made time for Miranda the aspiring singer. Miranda the businesswoman had been a surprise discovery, and she found herself reviewing the list with a critical eye for those who would help promote the band or give them something in return. She had a familiar name and stopped. Is this right? Gwen and Simon are in town? Sheila nodded. Yeah, I figured you wouldn't mind me adding them. Not at all, but +4? Yeah, they have a group they're traveling with. We have room in the VIP area, but if you want to say no. No, it's okay. For Gwen, it's okay. The tour manager nodded and took the list back. She walked away, and her phone buzzed, and she turned back. "He's almost here. I'll have him on the stage in 10. Miranda nodded and called for a break. The crew could still work on the lights, because she wanted them perfect since they'd be recording these shows. She jumped off the stage and headed to the bar to grab a bottle of water, drinking it slowly and peeling the label while sitting on a bar stool and trying to look at the room the way the audience might. It was a large warehouse space with a cement floor that slanted to the stage. Acoustics would be tough. The stage had a lovely red velvet curtain hung from an old-fashioned frame. This had been a theater once, but somewhere along the way the seats had been ripped out, cabaret tables and chairs had been added, and those were being moved to the back of the house by the staff. Tonight was standing room only. The only seats would be in the old balcony, the VIP section. She smiled to think that Gwen would be up there. Gwen had always been good to Miranda and had given her a start. She'd been covering dark wave songs with a string quartet backing her, and they'd been a big hit at Gwen's club, and after a few months they were the weekly Tuesday headliner. That's how she'd first met Vince and his tribe of friends. When they'd come into the club, it suddenly seemed like it was the best place in the world to be. The bartenders had stayed busy supplying drink after drink to the tables where they held court, and the tables surrounding them filled up with people who thought they could be cool by proxy. They'd step on a lonely dance floor, and by the time the song was over, everyone else in the club had suddenly realized how much they loved to dance. They were infectious, but the disease they carried was carefree abandon, surrendering to the charms of the moment, and it was highly contagious. Miranda had thought of Sabine as patient zero. She'd hated her on sight. It didn't help that Miranda had gotten the distinct feeling that if Sabine hadn't approved of her, Vince would never have dated her, or she may not have even kept the Tuesday night gig. It had just never set well with her. And before they'd ever even met, she'd watched Sabine and assumed that she was someone special to Vince. His group had treated her like their queen, and she always danced almost exclusively with him. Over time, she'd realized that Sabine always went home with the bartender Daniel, and Vince had made it clear to her that he and Sabine had always only been friends, up until that weekend 3 years ago anyway. But she made up her mind to dislike her long before then, and decided that her party girl mixed with absent-minded professor act was masking something dark. So she perfected a graceful smile and shrug when Sabine's name came up, but hearing about her always made Miranda's stomach churn. And Vince's latest obsession with her was not the only reason, but that obsession had made for some great songwriting, and it killed her to admit that Sabine had in some way inspired her current success. She wondered if she and Vince would ever be free of her ghost. As if her thoughts summoned him, Vince appeared on the stage. Holding up his hands to block the stage light, he looked into the room for her. She wanted to stand and wave. She wanted to run to him, but she wouldn't. He would have to come to her. He made his way slowly, jumping from the stage, talking to the rest of the band, to the crew, but he came, and he reached out a hand to her as if asking her to dance, and she stood up.